Now let's have a look at some other modeling features, things that we call the technical modeling, which has less to do with the subject that you are actually modeling, but more with the techniques of how you approach workflows, how you access functions, etc. So let me switch off the most parts of the witcher here and turn on this crossbow that we have here. You frame in on it, and you see this crossbow is made up of several objects that are all independent at the moment. We want to merge that together at the end. But let's first start with some modeling features or some modeling finalization that I want to do here on this object. So first thing is this object down here. I need to connect it with a bow of polygons to create some sort of a handle that is part of the model here. So I'm gonna take two faces and then shift right mouse button. I can access the bridge faces tool, and bridge faces also comes up with an in-view editor now. Most of the tools do so far because that is a very smart way to edit the attributes that you would see in the channel box. So this is much smoother here to edit it over here. So I can set the divisions right from here. And especially important is the curve type, because I want to blend in and out of the initial polygons. And you see, oh, the direction is wrong. So now I can set in the new bridge tool, I can set the directions to plus and minus for both selected polygons. So that allows me to create a proper polygon here. And then you see it is twisted, so we need some more divisions. Oh no, it works okay. So depending on the number of divisions that we have, it is okay. So sometimes you just touch one of these values here and the model gets rebuilt. So that is the first thing that has changed and has become new and better. Another example of modeling here, let's have a look at the wedge faces tool. So wedge faces in the past was always so that you select, or you better go to multi-selection, and then you select one face and a neighboring edge. And when you do this correctly, you can access the wedge faces. You see wedge faces has a wedge angle and a number of divisions that you can set, but that is it so far. And wedge faces refused to work if your selected edge is not neighboring the selected face. So this has changed now. I have another little cube here that I can use. So in multi-selection, I would go and select the face and then select this object here and an edge on this other cube. Now when I do the wedge faces, you see that it works with the other edge selected. So I can do my wedge face directly from here. And the cube, of course, this is no longer of interest. Just, you know, the message that you can now use any edge that is somewhere on the same object or on any other object. Now let's have a look at the bow of the crossbow. It's supposed to be a metal piece. I'm going to do the isolate select here. It's supposed to be a metal piece, and you can see nobody could ever bend a piece of iron that is that thick. So we need to make it thinner somehow and look more fragile, or, you know, thinner so that it looks like somebody could bend it. I'm gonna take some faces here. Actually, I want to have this row of faces on the top. So I'll double click and I can go on here, just simply select the end face, simply double click and remove all of these faces. So the bottom is still there. And then I double click all faces and I'll do an extrude face. So I hold the shift right mouse button, you know this trick, for polygon modeling, and extrude the faces. And instead of using this manipulator, I'm going to use the in-view editor. So I want to scale the thickness inside. Right, so outside would be nice, but the two pieces are too far away. I want to scale it inside and maybe thickness that like so. I'm holding the control key to fine tune that. So any of these values here can be fine tuned when you hold the control key. Something like that here. And that's fine for me. So when I go back, I realize, oh, this turns out that the texture has become very dark. And that is because all my faces are now reversed. So I simply double click everything. And again, shift right mouse button, face normals. And here I can reverse the normals, and it brings my texture back here. So now we have the normal shading back, right? Control 1 again to switch off the isolate select. Here's my new bow. Looks better, looks, you know, looks more like somebody could really bend it. And then let's have a look at this little object here. I want to do something with that one. Hit frame selection. I want to bevel this little feature here, insert another bevel. So I want to select these faces here. There is several methods. If it's only a few polygons, you can of course click them one by one. You could try to select start and end and double click. In this case, it would, you know, spill out and select other pieces of the object as well. And of course, you can hold the tab key and start painting. Tab key is some sort of quick paint selection that allows you to just paint across the object to select components. Very, very nice method. What we wanted to do is bevel here. So I'm gonna bevel these faces. And the new bevel tool, you know, we are constantly working on the bevel tool. There's more, you know, we are collecting more and more cases where a certain bevel algorithm wouldn't work and another algorithm needs to kick in. So if you send us examples of things that are not working, we can improve the tool further on. So this one is already pretty good here. So with the InView editor, I can hold the control key and define the fraction of how much of the neighboring faces or the neighboring edges will be used up. With the segments, I can define how many segments I want, and you see it's now a nice and round bevel. With the depths, I can define whether it's a flat thing or bulged or it's negative. You see that we can have negative bevels now, depending on the number of subdivisions. And we can also overshoot and say the depth is something like 4, so you get a shape like this one here. Which was not possible before with the old bevel. So I'm going to set it back to 1 here, and maybe the segments a little bit back. A word now to these values of mitering. They are normally set to auto, and you see that after the bevel, these edges here are no longer parallel. So that is a result of the mitering. So what do we do with these edges here? And of course, you can set these values. So if you need the parallel edges, you can set this to, I think, no, it was not hard edge, it was edge. So this uses the original edges and doesn't touch those, and has to see how it can fit the rest of the bevel to, you know, into these spans across between the edges. So auto in most cases gives you a very nice result, and yeah, you can keep it there. And there's, you know, other values that you can set: angle tolerance for smoothing, for example, the force parallel that forces the edges of the bevel edge to be parallel, and so on. So there's quite a few things that you can set on this new bevel. You should try that out. It's a really, really cool way of beveling now. So I'll control 1 to switch off the isolate select. And finally, you know, I want to merge everything together to be able to handle this as one object. Now, when I do that, let me engage the move tool. You see that the pivot currently would be here. This is my last selected object. In the new combine, there is a function that allows me to set that the last object, the last selected object, will create the pivot or will define the pivot position. So I'll toggle this one here, the main body, to define that this is going to be my pivot position. Okay, so I combine everything. That's my pivot position. Now, when I switch on the grid, you will see that we have some offset from the grid. So it's about like 20 units away from the center of the grid, but my translates are 0, 0, 0. So I would expect when I enter 0, 0, 0 that my pivot sits in the center, and that's not correct here, which is in this case maybe not a big problem, but in case you have a problem here, you can go to the modify menu and bake the pivot. So the bake pivot allows you to bake the pivot in the position, rotation, or both, and say, you know, wherever this thing is, I want to see this in my translation. So now you see these 22 units show up in the translations. When I enter a 0, then the pivot is really in the center of my universe. And of course, as I said, it doesn't matter too much in this case here. Another important thing when you are modeling, especially when you have a complex object like this one here, let's expect you want to further model on this object, but you have several things that are in the way. So for example, this rope thing here is in the way. I'm going to double click on these faces so they are selected, and I click the H hotkey to hide. I'm going to hide these objects, so I don't need to see this one for the moment, and I don't want to see these little pieces here because I want to work on the bow, for example, or do something. So that way you can hide components from your object. Now the next question is, how do I select them to show them again? Because these objects don't have anything in the outliner that I could select and show. So the thing is that in the display menu you will find under show all components. It even has a hotkey, Control and Alt H, that allows you to reveal all hidden components, right? So that you can freely go around and hide these components and don't have to worry about how to get them back finally. Good. So let's go back to object mode and switch on the rest of the Witcher here, and also his skeleton. So by the skeleton you see that he has a skeleton built into the body, and there are even hooks for the weapons. So here on the hip, for example, or here in the hand, there's a hook for these weapons. And I could take this thing here and snap it to this joint, which is an okay workflow. I mean, snapping is okay, but then when it comes to orientation, how do I make sure that the crossbow has a proper orientation? That's not so nice currently. So now we have in the modify menu, we have this match transforms thing. So match all transforms. Let me show you match. The match translation will just copy the translations. Match rotation will do just the rotations and scaling accordingly, or match all transforms will do all of them. So I could take this crossbow, for example, and say, actually it belongs to the back of the character, match all transforms, and we are there. That's pretty cool. Another thing is the sword here, for example. I want the sword to be here on the hip. Take the sword, this one here, match all transforms. The sheath also, and the hotkey was 9, match all transforms. And you see, this one is not working because the pivot is not in the right position. So let me undo that. So the pivot of the sheath is not right. So what do? The pivot of the sword is correct. So I wish I could copy the pivot of the one object to another one. And of course it's possible. So select all of the objects you want to modify. And then the last one will be the pivot. And then say match transforms, match pivots. And now both objects have a correct pivot. And I can actually pick both of them and move them. Right? So that's what I mean with technical modeling. These are the techniques that you can use to move things around, to access functions, etc., etc. That has all to do with the technical modeling. And what we've seen here, improvements to the bridge tool, to the wedge tool, to the extrude, for example, the bevel, and then the way to combine pivots and bake pivots, to hide and show components. That's all has to do with technical modeling.